invite our second speaker, Sister Safia Sabreen. Safia, are you connected? I can see your name here. Sister Safia actually is her full name is Safia Sabreen, is an Islamic philosopher, researcher, and mechanical engineer with a unique focus on the field of Islam and science. She holds a master's in philosophy and is currently pursuing a PhD, what is called quantum physics, director of the Second Golden Age, a groundbreaking multimedia project that revisits the Muslim scientific revolution inspired by the Quran and explores ways to inspire a contemporary revival. She also served as assistant professor at Cluster University in India, her work, etc. So I think it will be you. Do you mind to unmute and proceed?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay, Safia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's such an honor. It's such a pleasure to be there with such senior scholars, role models, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So I'm going to share my screen. Please allow me to share my screen. Yes.
Yes, Safia, we can see your screen. You can proceed.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. So I'm going to be discussing the subject of robotics, artificial intelligence, and artificial life generation in the Islamic scientific heritage. And then the implication of knowing this, the implications of this for the Islamization of knowledge in general and science in particular. So the agenda of my discussion is going to be as follows. Firstly, a little bit on the developments in robotics as a science in the Islamic Golden Age and the development of programmable devices that happened during that time. I like to call it the Islamic scientific revolution because that's what it really was. And the start of the algorithmic style of reasoning and computational devices. We're going to go into what exactly does it mean to have this algorithmic style of reasoning. What was before this, what was after these developments, and the great difference between them. And then Jabir bin Hayyan's theory of artificial life. I think this is one of the most, fascinating theories that came out of the Islamic Golden Age and the Islamic scientific revolution. This idea of creating life in the environment of a laboratory. And the Islamization of knowledge, then I'm going to basically take all of these developments that took place and analyze them from the lens of the Islamization of knowledge. How can we integrate this concept of Islamization into these fields? Because they're so relevant to our time today. And finally, then I'm going to end with the social, the religious, and the economic implications for the Islamization of these technologies, how it's so important that we actually move ahead and produce practical solutions for the Islamization of these cutting edge, groundbreaking technologies that have taken over our world, I'd say. So before I start, it has to be known for scholars that science as we know it, as we know it as an empirical, objective discipline, it owes its existence to Arabic culture. This is said by Robert Briffault, who was a very well-known historian, and his book is very famous. But he says he says that science owes its very existence to Arabic culture. I'd disagree with him. I'd say it was the Islamic Tawhidic culture. It wasn't just Arabic culture, but we get his point. He says the ancient world was pre-scientific. What we call science arose in Europe as a result of a new spirit of inquiry, unknown to the Greeks. The spirit and those methods were introduced into the European world by the Arabs. So he's right in his observations, but obviously it was much larger than the Arabs. It had many other ethnicities as well. And it was the Tawhidic view on the world that actually revolutionized firstly the Islamic world and then Europe. So moving on, the first topic that I would discuss is robotics and programmable devices that were created in the Islamic scientific revolution. So I'm going to go to a very interesting figure from the 11th and the 12th century in the Muslim world, Al-Jazari, who was a well-known mechanical engineer of that time, and he is known as the father of robotics because of what all he created and the fascinating book that he wrote on robotics. So he has been credited with creating the first programmable humanoid robot. As you can see on the right side of the slide, that was his drawing from his original text, where he shows how he can create, and he did create, a sort of a robot serving beverage. And below the page, he actually gave the mechanism of how the arm would move, what the mechanism would be, how the beverage actually would pass through the arm into the glass. And he created many fundamental other mechanical inventions, automata such as automated hand washing devices, and even a boat with 4 automated musicians. I'm going to show you that. And especially it was his book in the 1206, what he wrote, the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, which is still, we still have that, and it has been completely translated. It's one of the most comprehensive and qualified compilations of robotics and automated devices till date. That's some of his inventions. We have to understand these are extremely, even though they look very artistic, but this requires a lot of engineering skill to make something like that. So that was a boat that would move on its own just by means of water pressure and have instruments playing on its own. All the instruments would literally play on their own using water, hydraulic, and air pressure. And Al-Jazari is also known for his historic invention of the crankshaft. So all of our automobiles and many other machines actually run through the crankshaft. This idea of translating rotary or circular motion into linear or straight motion, or vice versa, that's done by the crankshaft. It was Al-Jazari who did that. I mean, till a few decades, we knew that this invention took place in the 15th century in Europe, but that's wrong. It was Al-Jazari who created this mechanism. And the first programmable machine in the history of engineering was created by Banu Musa brothers, who were very famous engineers and mathematicians from the court of the Abbasid Khalifa in the House of Wisdom, Bait al-Hikmah in Baghdad. And they created this extremely complicated design of a self-playing flute. This is a self-playing musical instrument. Just by means of using water pressure, they could create something like this. And here they actually give, they didn't just create mechanisms and instruments, they actually gave complete instructions on how to recreate them, the full procedure behind the invention. And that's why we can actually, there's so many museums around the world that are recreating these technologies. And he writes, one of the Banu Musa brothers who created this mechanism shows that how this can all of this mechanism basically can be put in the body of a robot, and it would seem as if the flute is being played, but behind it would be all of this sophisticated mechanism. So basically what I'm trying to show you is that the medieval age was the age of innovation, and the innovation, the kind of which we have today. This is extremely sophisticated engineering. This is not some primitive engineering. Moving on to Islamic algorithms and artificial intelligence. In 833, Al-Khwarizmi, the very famous mathematician, who's also known as the father of algebra, and the term algorithms comes from his name. Al-Khwarizmi became Al-Khwarizmi in Latin, and then algorithms came from that. He wrote the most famous texts detailing solutions to linear and quadratic equations. And these equations we use all the time in our life, whether in business transactions, in engineering, to know the speed of vehicles, to know the trajectory of missiles, designing satellites. We use all of these equations in daily life. But what his main, contribution to the history of mathematics and to the history of artificial intelligence is giving the shape to this algorithmic method of mathematics. He created this method of solving problems and creating outputs, which is the algorithmic method. And basically, it's a procedure which breaks down complex problems into sequences of simpler operational steps to transform an input into an output. So you have a set of input instructions, then you have a sort of a formula or an algorithm, a processing procedure takes place, and that produces the output. Now, what is important to be known, that by the way is a page from his original text, which was called Kitab al-Jabr, from which we get algebra. And now what's interesting to note is that the mechanism behind artificial intelligence still today is just the same. It's just the use of these algorithms, breaking down complex problems into simpler ones using a method or an algorithm of processing to produce output. And all throughout our daily life, we're interacting with different kinds of AI, like facial recognition. You enter a mall and there's a machine to recognize your face, or autocorrect that we use whenever we are writing an essay or anything. Search engines like Google, Microsoft, or social media algorithms that we have. Many a times you're on social media and you checked an ad, and then tomorrow, day after, the same ad keeps on popping up. That's algorithm that recognizes your patterns. So all of this is basically a sophisticated form of what Al-Khwarizmi actually created. The most easiest way algorithm that is used in artificial intelligence is called supervised machine learning, which is nothing but giving instructions to the machine that the picture of the elephant is called the elephant. So whenever you notice the picture of the gray animal, that is the elephant, and that is supervised machine learning. You're not really teaching it. The word used is wrong. It's not really learning it. You're not really teaching it, because that's a machine. But what is happening is you're connecting these two things, an image with a name, and that requires algorithms, steps, and procedures just directly derived from the text of Al-Khwarizmi. And on the right side, you can see a device that's the astrolabe, which used to be used in the medieval ages to navigate for navigation. Basically, you're out in the open, you want to navigate either on land or sea, to know the time of the day or night, to know the position of stars and seasons as well. So this is the earliest, you could say, the earliest form of a computational device. You put in a few inputs there, the position of a particular star or position of a particular landmark, and then you turn the dial and then you get an output. So these were forms of artificial, I wouldn't say artificial, but forms of computational devices. Moving on, then we have the Islamic theory of artificial life generation, something which is extremely considered controversial today. So I want to introduce you to Jabir bin Hayyan, a very famous figure from the early period of the Islamic scientific revolution. He's known as the father of experimental chemistry. Chemistry before him was more so, to do with alchemy and magic and lots of superstitious stuff. Jabir bin Hayyan put emphasis on practical work and conducting experiments. So he is the father of experimental chemistry. And as Will Durant, the historian, also agrees, that as a science, chemistry was almost created by the Muslims. Before this, it just existed as vague hypothesis. So among all the chemists, Jabir bin Hayyan stands out the tallest. And there's no other work. Paul Krauss, who's very famous for his work on Jabir bin Hayyan, he says there's no alchemical work of Islam that reveals such vast knowledge of ancient literature or has such encyclopedic character than Jabir's work. So he's just a brilliant polymath. And all of what he wrote, basically, those kind of technologies are still in use. So he perfected the process of distillation, which is still in use. And it is still, the same equipment that is used in industries around the world to distill crude petroleum into petrol and diesel and gas and naphtha and all of that. It's the same mechanism. There hasn't been much of a change in that. And what I find really interesting about Jabir bin Hayyan is that his spiritual figure and his teacher was Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, who is the sixth great grandson of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And Jabir bin Hayyan literally gives so much credit to Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, even for his scientific work. I find that really interesting. Moving on now, I just to understand how he got to his theory of artificial life, we have to understand his philosophy of science, or his what he calls the theory of balance, or the theory of mizan. And there, it'll be very interesting for all the scholars, there to see that he actually uses what we now call the Tawhidic principle. He doesn't call it Tawhidic at that time, but we can recognize the Tawhidic element in his philosophy of science. He says that all things fall under the principle of balance, and it is by means of this principle that man is able to make sense of the world. So he says basically there's a unity behind all of this diversity, and there's a balance, an equilibrium that governs everything in the world. And he says this is the way. Basically, if you take this idea of the world, that there is a balance, this is the way through which one understood and made sense of, and above all, measured and manipulated the objects and the processes of the universe. So even today in science, we have the concept of the uniformity of laws. You have to assume that laws work the same in Malaysia, in India, in outer space. You have to assume that. So this is a sort of a variant of Jabir bin Hayyan's theory of balance. And he says that this is the supreme principle, the Qaida Uzma of the world, which governs everything. And by this method, we can know everything. So if he says this, the next necessary conclusion of a theory like this is that he says that as time progresses and humans attain increased control and knowledge of this cosmic balance, and this mizan, and this precise quantitative structure of the universe, this will allow them to synthetically create things that are naturally found in the world, from inanimate minerals, objects, to animate life, leading up to artificial creation of human life. And which is extremely fascinating how he would say this in the 9th century. So he's saying there is this balance, and as time progresses, humans will understand this balance. They will manipulate it, and whatever nature creates, they will try to replicate it, starting from inanimate minerals and objects, going to animate life, and then even to the creation of human life. But there's a difference between us and what we would create. He says, okay, before that, it's important to note that all of this is written in his book of stones, the Kitab al-Ahjar, where he discusses the possibility of creating scorpions, snakes, and even humans in the right laboratory environment. And in his book, Al-Mizan al-Sagir, he writes there are two sorts of creation, a first and a second. The first is divine creation. So that's what God created. The second is represented by imitation, and it resembles the first. This is what man creates. And the difference between divine creation and artificial generation is that the first creation is instantaneous. It doesn't require time. It doesn't require knowledge accumulation. It's just instantaneous. Whereas human beings require generations and generations of knowledge, and human beings and human effort. That's the difference. So he distinguishes between the two. And finally, what Jabir bin Hayyan, he considers this theory of artificial life, which he calls takween. As we know in Arabic, the word kaun means creation, to be, to come into being. So takween is the process of creation. He considers takween to be a source of seeking Allah's nearness through understanding his creation. So for him, this is a form of ibadah, where you are actually emulating, or you are following the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of creation, of being the Khalifatullah on earth, by using the creation of Allah to create things and to create other things and to understand the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in the universe. And what is interesting is Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, who is his teacher, and Jabir bin Hayyan insist that this knowledge is extremely powerful. Therefore, it must not reach the uninitiated in spirituality. And that is so true. They were right in the 9th century. They knew that this is extremely powerful knowledge. If it goes into the hands of people who are not spiritually pure, it's going to create fitna, and that's what we see in the world today. But what's important to note is that in the history of AI, we usually start from 1943. If we study the history of AI, we are given a very Western view of the history of AI starting from 1943, whereas what should be actually included is the contributions of the medieval Muslim precursors who created the algorithmic style, who created theories of artificial intelligence, artificial life generation, that are precursors to genetic engineering, synthetic biology. And the same works for the history of genetic engineering as well. If you go and buy books on the history of genetic engineering, you actually see the huge gap that they've left from 30,000 BCE to 7,800 BCE. It's before Christ, and then a huge jump to 1973. What happened between this? That's not mentioned, but this is the kind of the narrative that needs to be changed, and Muslim contributions have to be recognized. Now, finally, the last part of my presentation that deals with basically how can we appreciate these amazing developments and how can we actually use them for our project of the Islamization of knowledge. So I'm going to take the two-step procedure that has been suggested, written by Dr. Sayyid Naqib al-Attas. He, in his book, Islam and Secularism, he says step number one is the isolation of Western harmful elements of knowledge. What has to be done is that we need scholars who are well aware of Western philosophy and the Western epistemic elements that control knowledge production. So we need to isolate that from knowledge. Then this step number two is the infusion of Islamic key concepts, Islamic ethics and Islamic key concepts, which would be Tawheed, obviously, and the ethics of Islam. And only then would we have created true knowledge. Right now, knowledge is in the form of a corrupted state, but we can make it into true knowledge by this two-step procedure. Those are pages from his book, Islam and Secularism. What are the dangers at hand if we don't do this? I really want us to understand that this is not just a nice, feel-good project that we have, Islamization of science. It just sounds so good. But we have to understand the dangers that are imminent if knowledge is not Islamized. And in 9th century, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq and Jabir bin Hayyan are saying that this is powerful knowledge. This should not go into the hands of wrong people. This has gone into the hands of wrong and corrupt people. And we still are not taking the effort to Islamize it. The problem is ours. So the dangers are extremely, extremely big. Number one is the widespread propaganda that has been disseminated that humans like God can create a new race of human beings. They can pose serious challenges to faith and religious experience. So you kind of, get this message from all of the literature that has been written on artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, is that, you don't need God. We are creating humans. We are creating life in the lab. Why do we need God? And mostly you'll see atheists, atheist scientists taking up this narrative. But then we don't, we are not engaging them in the actual way we need to be engaged. We need to understand what is being created. There is a difference between what we are creating and how we exist as human beings. Number two is the use of AI to compromise privacy. That is also a very big challenge. And Islamization would actually address that challenge in the best way. AI in weapons to kill faster and better. In fact, artificial intelligence is actually, has the greatest application, unfortunately, today in the worst of industries. There has been so much news about it being used as experiments in Ukraine, in Gaza, in all of these places. So these are challenges that Muslim scientists, Muslim philosophers, and thinkers need to address. And finally, AI to compromise politics of countries. AI is even used to, change and influence results of elections and politics, and so much information is at the risk of being, changed. Okay, finally.
Safia, how many more slides to go? Can you take
Just
up?
three more.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm almost finishing up, sir. So finally, I will go to the last section, and which is for just to make this this subject become more and more familiar and be at home for all of us. We have to understand even the Prophet ﷺ informed us of the rise of this intelligent technology, and when he talked about the hadith of Dajjal, no, before this, the hadith about the talking inanimate objects like shoes, handheld devices communicating. He said in Jami' Tirmidhi, the tip of a person's whip, the straps on his sandals speak to him, and his thigh informs him of what occurred with his family. We usually keep our phones in our, pockets, and trees will speak, he said, in the last age. He talked about reproductive technologies. Many scholars talk about this mutawatir hadith. The maid servant will give birth to her mistress to mean surrogacy. And there are others where he talks about possibly gene editing, where the hadith of Dajjal and the animals during that time will have bulky bodies. So pasturing animals would come to them with their humps very high, their udders full of milk, and their flanks stretched. Something that can be achieved only via, genetic engineering. Now, it has to be understood, the associate professor before me, he explained it very well, and I will just reiterate that the Western philosophical framework that underlies all of the knowledge production process is also obviously underlying artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. So it's utilitarian, it is hedonistic, it is materialistic. And these technologies, if you notice, they only serve colonial, hegemonic motives in their current form. So all of this has to be revised, all of this has to be removed in the process of Islamization. And what would be the implications finally? They would be firstly social implications. Imagine AI and genetic engineering. These would be used to promote maqasid al-sharia and the promotion of human welfare and holistic prosperity. Imagine the use of AI to lift economically challenged masses out of poverty. They talk about AI replacing human beings and, so many people being, taken out of their jobs, but we haven't even used AI where it needs to be used. Then there's philosophical religious implications of Islamization, that we would use it to understand human consciousness, which is one of the biggest mysteries in science in the world today. And we would use it to even decode the two revelations. The two-book theory that we have is that the world and the Quran are the two revelations of Allah. We could use it to understand the structure, the order, and the complementarity of both. The common signature of God that exists both in the universe and in the Quran. We could use that, and we could use this to boost the global halal industry. And finally, imagine the commercial and the economic implications of the Islamization of these technologies. Technology obviously is power. So whoever produces better tech rules the world. The use of AI to boost national economy, decrease imports, increase exports. In a country like Malaysia, imagine the benefits something like this would have. And the use of genetic engineering to improve healthcare, to end gain of function research, which is basically to create viruses and this and that. Islamic view on genetic engineering would be to create cures, not diseases. So with that, finally, I would remind myself and everyone in the gathering that Islamization of knowledge is an Islamic obligation. It's fard. It is a prophetic sunnah. It is a Quranic command. It is the road to Jannah. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sister. MashaAllah. We call Ism ba Musamma. Safiya, and Sabira, and then Saeed, mashallah. All these good combinations are attached to your nomenclature. Alhamdulillah. So we, brothers, in a minutes to conclude the session. In the meantime, let us give a round of applause to the speakers, please.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I think it's really wonderful to have our two scholars from two different disciplines speaking about the reality of knowledge and the reality of the context of knowledge in which we live today and consume and internalize and apply and create impacts on ourselves, on our societies, on people. And as Professor Murad mentioned, and also our Professor Redwan, yeah, I think the whole situation traces back to the Western model of civilization and how they articulated knowledge, philosophy, knowledge, and later on comes science and technology, give them power. Then they created the knowledge power or the power of knowledge from these philosophical perspectives, including positivism, existentialism, materialism, rationalism, empiricism, Freudism, evolutionism, relativism. So that's what conditions our creation and conception of knowledge. Whether we understand it or not, that's the reality. In the last 150 years, knowledge is based on that. Whether you talk about management, or psychology, or social science, or biology, or neurology, or genetics, the philosophy behind it is all based on that philosophy. So the process of Islamization or Tawhidization is facing a very huge challenge. It's not a simple and easy process to do. It will consume centuries to reach another model that produces its products, like the products of the Western knowledge, which is science, technology, artificial intelligence, economics, management, governance. That's their dictionary. But your dictionary and the translation of that dictionary or philosophy or worldview into real science and knowledge, and this will take long time. If we are not patient and sabar, then will be very hard. We have just 40 years in this exercise. It will consume generations to bring back the new Islamic civilization with a model which can integrate knowledge. But anyway, I believe that what is important to understand at ISTAC or IUM or in the universities which adopt this idea, the bottom line is the Quran. The bottom line is the revealed knowledge. And how you translate that revealed knowledge into epistemology, into philosophy, into guidance, into orientation. So, brothers and sisters, understanding the Islamic worldview is the key to all, because you cannot, now we are talking about this, what is Islamization? Islamization actually is deconstruction or deconstruct positivism and the brothers and sisters of deconstruction. But if you want to deconstruct, you need later to reconstruct and synthesize to create new knowledge. To reconstruct, you need a model. That's the Islamic worldview. So as long as our researchers, our scholars, our ummah, our ulama, our academicians cannot fluently and easily deal with the Islamic epistemology, with the Islamic worldview and use it in different areas of life, whether you are a medical doctor or a management or social scientist, what you need is just that power or ability to use the Islamic worldview in your area. Then we will dismantle the idea of segmentation and compartmentalization of disciplines and this. Everybody should be empowered to use the Islamic epistemology, the Islamic worldview in his area. Then we can move from there, brothers and sisters. So it's really, we need also to teach our scholars, researchers to be able to deal with the Quran, to deal with the Sunnah. How do you deal with the principles of epistemology or ontology or existential or cosmology or of the Quran? Are we able to do now? Our student here at ISTAC, for example, or in many other places, we cannot even, read strong texts of Ibn Khaldun or Al-Farabi or Al-Ghazali or Ibn Sina and really do a critical assessment or deal, let alone dealing with the Quran, understanding how the epistemology of the Quran functions, how system thinking, this is Western concept, and this, actually the Quran itself teaches you system or network thinking, how it relates between the universe, the soul, the mind, the ethics, the politics, the history, the ghaib. This doesn't teach you system thinking. I tell you, go see Al-Ghazali, see the books of Al-Ghazali. You see a thinking, a mind, integrated mind thinking everywhere. Al-Shafi'i, Al-Farabi, Shatibi, who is considered on Usul al-Fiqh alim. If you read his book, Usul al-Muwafaqat, fi Usul al-Sharia, talking about social science and human science. But I never seen our people of jurisprudence or our people who are doing fiqh telling that Shatibi is talking about social science and human science. How? Ibn Khaldun, علم العمران, علم of تمدن, علم of sociology, علم of culture, علم of anthropology. Ibn Khaldun, in that علم العمران, is talking about religion and how religion, how values, how ethics create civilizations. All his principles are from the Quran. Oppression leads to destruction. Akhlaq are the basic, all principles. But how he used them in sociology, and that's integration. Shatibi, just give you one. I'm sorry, Prof. Becoming different. Okay, so I'll just give you one example about this Imam Shatibi, who introduced the idea of maqasid al-Sharia in a more dynamic and integrated manner from usul al-fiqh. He brought the idea of maqasid. Maqasid become a framework for social and for Umran. Before Imam Shatibi, Al-Ghazali, Al-Nawawi, Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam, Al-Qarafi, all these, they talk about maqasid. Al-Juwayni, they talk about maqasid al-Sharia. Maqasid Sharia are the 5 values which all we know. Imam Shatibi come and say, okay, there is maqasid al-Sharia, but there is also maqasid al-Mukallaf. The maqasid al-Sharia or maqasid al-Sharia, that's what Allah intends, which is protection of religion, protection of intellect, protection of wealth. But the Mukallaf, you as a human being, you as Khalifa on earth, what is your maqasid? So he brings to the center the idea of the human being and what is his maqasid. That's the maqasid of Allah. He wants you, or he give you the Sharia to do this protection. But you, what are your maqasid? So it means he shifted the thinking of Sharia to the human being, to the person. Person means society, means family, means culture, means dynamics. Means he was telling us that the Sharia can also be very important focus. Not only the maqasid, we just left ourselves in the... And then what he say? What is the maqasid al-mukallaf? What is the maqasid of the Khalifa? What is the maqasid of the human being in this world? He summarized a lot of there in details, but he summarized it in one sentence. He say, maqasid al-mukallaf is to free himself from his own desires and grips and corruption with his own choice. Look at the freedom. With your own choice. You take the responsibility to build your own life, your own society, your own tamaddun. With your own choice, as you are a servant of God without your choice. Servant here means creature of God. So Sharia is all based on this principle of a human being living in life, building his life with his own choice, but with this guidance of the maqasid al-sharia. So later on he was saying that for this to happen, you need to understand the nafs of the mukallaf, the life of the mukallaf, the society of the mukallaf, the ahwal, call it ahwal, of the mukallaf. This is why what he say, if you want to, you get the fatwa as a faqih, and you want to give the fatwa, you don't rush to give the fatwa. The first step you do, you check in the Quran and Sunnah. If you want it, you find it okay, applicable, don't implement directly. فعرضها على حال الزمان وأهله. Introduce it in the social context, in the reality, in the place where you live, and check whether if you implement it, it will lead to more harm or less harm or solve. So he's talking about sociology, talking about implementation, talking about management, about governance, how to deal with people, how from the bottom, the heart of usul al-fiqh. And to me, I say that maqasid al-sharia is a sociology science. It's not the sharia. Yeah, we got it from sharia, but it's a sociology to regulate. So brothers and sisters,
Like
I don't want to give you another muhadara, but it's really wonderful today. We have learned a lot from our two professors, each one of them in his own way. He raised many important questions, many important things. And then I think we take it from here. We need to deepen our thinking, our discussions, our critique, our things. Here, from here we move, inshallah. May God bless you all. And we end our session with the reading of Surah Al-Asr. And maybe our brother can continue. Go ahead.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you, sir. So now concluded already, dua is recited, so we can adjourn, inshallah. There's a cup of tea. My apology for our virtual attendance. You could have your breakfast, evening tea virtually. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Is anyone can take the photograph?
Yeah, we want to have a photo together with our
So
professor.
the session is adjourned. We are taking photograph.
Come, Prof. Murad, come. Come. Come, brothers and sisters, let's have a photo together. Come.